everyone. Welcome back to English Practice Lab. I'm Sarah.
And I'm John. Most people don't know how to use may, might, perhaps, and often correctly. Not even intermediate learners or native speakers sometimes. So, are you sure you are using these 4 words the right way? Because by the end of this episode, you might realize you've been mixing them up your whole English learning journey.
See what he did there? He used might correctly in that sentence without even trying. These words carry a surprising amount of grammatical weight. May, might, perhaps, and often. By the end of this episode, you'll never confuse them again.
First, we'll dig into may and might. Then we'll move on to perhaps. And finally, often, which is about frequency, not possibility. Let's start our deep dive with the twins of the conditional family, may and might. On the surface, they look almost identical. If you look them up in a basic dictionary, both talk about possibility, and both can fit into the exact same sentence structures. So why do we actually have 2 separate words? Why not just stick to one and make our lives easier?
Because they don't carry the same psychological or grammatical weight, John. Think of it like an adjustable dial or a volume slider on your phone, rather than a simple on and off light switch. May sits firmly on the more confident, higher probability side of that dial. When you choose to use the word may, you are explicitly suggesting to your listener that there is a fairly real, grounded chance that something is true or is about to happen. You usually have a clue or a reason backing up your statement. Let's look at an example. The meeting may start late because of the traffic downtown. In this scenario, I have concrete evidence, the heavy traffic reports. So my confidence level is relatively high.
Right. That makes perfect sense. On the flip side, might slides that exact same dial way down toward the uncertain, speculative end. It sounds much more tentative, like a wild guess pulled out of thin air, or a hypothetical scenario, rather than something backed up by real-world clues. It signals to the other person that you are much more hesitant. Look at this second example. The meeting might start late. Here, I'm just guessing. I don't know anything about the traffic. I'm just throwing out a vague possibility.
Exactly. The emotional temperature of the sentence completely changes based on that one syllable. Imagine you are sitting at home, looking at your calendar, and texting a friend who invited you out. The word you pick sends a very clear, subtle signal about your intentions. If you say, I may come to the party, that means there's a high, plausible chance. But if you say, I might come to the party, that means a low, speculative chance. If you send that second text, you are basically telling them, honestly, don't count on it. I'm probably staying home. Learners who master this distinction immediately sound far more natural and nuanced to native speakers.
Now, let's look at another layer, because may has a crucial second job that is completely separate from measuring possibility. And that job is dealing with permission. This is where a lot of intermediate learners accidentally start making mistakes because they try to force other modal verbs into this specific role.
Right. We use may to ask for permission in a highly polite, respectful, and formal way. It is the gold standard when you want to show deference. It works beautifully in high-stakes environments like professional job interviews, academic settings, or official emails sent directly to your boss. Listen to these examples. May I ask you a question? May I leave the room for a moment? Using may here shows you understand boundaries and are being intentionally courteous.
And what is fascinating is that the exact same word works in the opposite direction when you want to give permission to someone else. When used this way, it carries an authoritative, formal, and official tone. For instance, you may sit down now. Students may use calculators during this section of the exam. It sounds like a directive coming straight from a textbook, an examiner, an airplane captain, or a judge in a courtroom.
Now, A very common small trap that people fall into is thinking that might can simply replace may in these exact same permission structures. In modern English, that is a misconception. Might only truly works for permission when we shift into the past tense for reported speech, or if you are making an incredibly submissive, theatrical request. Let's look at the difference. Past reported speech. He asked if he might borrow the car. Overly polite present. Might I use the bathroom? If you say that last one in an everyday casual setting, it sounds like you literally stepped out of a 19th century British period drama.
Exactly. So, to keep it simple, might in the present tense doesn't really function to ask for permission anymore. Its absolute main job remains anchored in low certainty possibility, like it might rain later.
Now, let's push our grammar skills a bit further into the past. When we want to make an educated guess or speculate about an event that already happened, we cannot just use these modal verbs by themselves. We need to pair them with a present perfect structure, which gives us may have and might have, followed by a past participle. This is how native speakers reconstruct past mysteries.
Let's see how this looks in everyday conversation. Imagine you are waiting for a friend who is completely unresponsive. I texted her an hour ago and she hasn't replied. She may have lost her phone. They might have missed the train. That's probably why they're late. In casual, rapid-fire speech, native speakers will frequently use these two phrases interchangeably, without a second thought. However, if you want to be incredibly precise with your phrasing, may have leaned slightly more toward an explanation that is genuinely plausible and grounded in reality, while might have functions as just a vague, distant guess. Let's look at a real-world workplace scenario between two corporate colleagues to see this nuance in action. The client may be upset about the project delay. This is a plausible guess. She might be, but honestly, it could also be something totally unrelated to us. This is a vague speculation.
Speaker A has a strong reason to worry, while Speaker B is just throwing out alternative possibilities. Now, let's look closely at the negative forms. May not and might not. A crucial rule for learners to remember is that contractions like mayn't or mightn't virtually do not exist anymore. They are extremely rare and outdated in modern English. Always write them out as two distinct words. Also, notice how the negative completely changes the meaning between permission and possibility. Refusal of permission, you may not park your car here. Negative possibility, it might not rain this afternoon after all.
Now, let's expand our vocabulary and bring in word number 3 from our list, perhaps. Unlike the modal twins we just discussed, this word functions as a standalone adverb, which gives it incredibly flexibility. By simply inserting it into a sentence, it instantly makes your spoken and written English sound much more polished, professional, and elegant. At its absolute core, it simply means maybe, or it is possible, but it carries a far more sophisticated, intellectual tone that is highly respected in business and academic circles. Compare these two examples. Perhaps we've met before. Maybe we've met before. Both sentences convey the exact same underlying meaning, but the first version immediately establishes a completely different, much more refined impression.
That is so true, John. Another specific area where perhaps really shines is when you are dealing with numbers, percentages, or quantities that you are roughly estimating in conversation. There were perhaps 200 people at the concert.
I really love that specific example because it highlights a major structural difference. You absolutely could not say there were may 200 people or there were might 200 people. That completely breaks down and simply does not work grammatically. Perhaps, being an adverb, slots neatly and effortlessly right in front of numerical values in a way that modal auxiliary verbs never can.
Beyond numbers, it is also highly undervalued as a psychological softener when you need to give sensitive advice, offer critique, or make delicate suggestions to someone without causing offense. Listen to how it softens the tone. Softened advice? You don't look well. Perhaps you should see a doctor. Diplomacy at work? Perhaps we should revisit this proposal before the client meeting. Conditional suggestion? Perhaps it would be wiser for him to step down from the project, given everything that's happened.
It signals immense social tact, emotional intelligence, and professional diplomacy. But we must issue a quick warning to our listeners. Do not overuse this word with your close friends. If you look at your roommate on a Saturday afternoon and say, "Too stiff, perhaps we should grab coffee later," it sounds incredibly robotic and forced. In relaxed, everyday casual conversations, words like maybe or probably fit the comfortable atmosphere much better. Our final word of the day takes a completely different path. It is not about measuring possibility, speculating about the past, or asking for permission. Instead, it is purely about frequency, the word often. Even though it seems like a straightforward concept on paper, the trickiest part for English learners isn't understanding what it means, but figuring out exactly where to put it inside a sentence. Incorrect word order with frequency adverbs is one of the quickest ways to sound unnatural to a native speaker.
Exactly, John. Often simply tells us how frequently a specific action happens over time. While the core meaning is basic, its fluid syntax and shifting placement across different sentence structures consistently trip people up. Let's look at how it behaves in its most standard, everyday form. I often go for a run in the morning. She often forgets her keys.
To master this, you just need to internalize a few clear grammatical patterns. Here is the general foundational rule. When you are dealing with a standard, regular action verb, often must go right before that main verb. For example, I often visit my grandparents on weekends. Notice how it sits perfectly between the subject I and the main verb visit.
But watch out, because when you switch over to the verb to be, that entire rule completely flips on its head. Instead of going before the verb, often must slide directly after the verb to be, such as am, is, are, was, or were. If you place it before, it will instantly sound wrong to a native ear. Listen to the correct placement. He is often late to meetings. They are often busy on Fridays.
To truly master these concepts, let's look at the dark side of grammar.
We are going to actively tackle 4 incredibly common structural slips our intermediate students consistently make during conversations and explain exactly how you can fix them right now.
Mistake 1. Yesterday, he may leave early.
The correction. Once an action is entirely completed in the past, may completely loses its ability to grant permission. To fix this, you must say, yesterday, he was allowed to leave early. Mistake 2, mixing up the single word adverb and the 2-word modal combination, writing he may be tired instead of he may be tired. The distinction. They sound absolutely identical when spoken aloud, but mixing them up in written emails instantly signals a gap in your fundamental grammar. Remember, maybe he's tired. 1 word, an adverb at the start. He may be tired. 2 words, modal verb plus mean verb. Mistake 3, stacking identical synonyms. Perhaps maybe he forgot the meeting. The correction, pick just one. Both words perform the exact same semantic job, so doubling them up together doesn't make you sound more polite. It just sounds completely repetitive. Just say, perhaps he forgot, or maybe he forgot. Mistake 4, stiff word order in casual speech. Often I eat pizza on Fridays. The correction, while technically legal in literature, this structure feels way too stiff for a casual conversation between close friends. You should always use the plain, natural structure. I often eat pizza on Fridays.
To wrap everything up and cement these concepts in your mind, let's put all 4 words side by side, inside a single, cohesive, and natural mini-story. Seeing them interact within the exact same context is the absolute best way to see the structural and tonal differences clearly. Pay close attention to how each word alters the message.
Here is our all-in-one story. Perhaps you've noticed that Daniel is often late these days. He may have taken on too much work lately, or he might simply be struggling with his morning commute.
Either way, perhaps someone from the team should check in with him.
Look at how beautifully and effortlessly they all work together in that short paragraph.
Perhaps perfectly softens the opening observation so it doesn't sound like harsh gossip, while often precisely describes his recurring habitual pattern of behavior. Then, may have offers a highly plausible, logical guess about his recent past, whereas might immediately offers a much weaker, purely speculative alternative. Finally, perhaps returns at the very end to gently suggest a diplomatic course of action.
That is the ultimate goal of today's lesson, to fully internalize the emotional feeling and precise grammar behind each word. Try building your own quick challenge sentence right now, using any two of these 4 words together. Thanks so much for practicing your English with us today. Keep actively noticing these little words in conversations, and we will catch you in the next episode. See you then.